Most people never think for themselves. They never have any original ideas, and they never, ever, ever try to figure out how things work in the world for themselves. If you go out and you try to talk to anybody and get some, original opinions, most of them aren't going to have it. Most people do not think critically. Most people do not have the skill set, time, resources, or ability to try and actually whew, um, have their own opinions. It's very crazy, and I think it's becoming much more prevalent in some ways and less prevalent in others. Um, Many of you may not know, but for the vast majority of human history, people were followers for a lot of reasons, and they had to also really dig into groupthink in order to survive. So there's this very interesting thing that happens is that when we're born very selfish in our nature as far as individuals, babies, etc. And we're hyper focused on ourselves for survival because we're so weak, so vulnerable. But as you get older, you start to, you have more selfish things, you throw fits, etc. But it starts to get weeded out of you. And the more that you end up maturing and understanding your environment around you, you'll end up just going along with whatever the group says because you realize I need food, I need water, I need shelter, and I need protection from the environment and also, very importantly, from your other social group, from your social group. And having your own thoughts and opinions is less valuable than surviving. And taking the time to understand things truly is less valuable than surviving. So when, man, I go through life, I notice many people, when it comes to most anything, they just go along to get along with what the status quo of how something works is, or if they're simply told how something is supposed to be or the best way to do it, that's what they do because subconsciously they're unable to think otherwise. And there's a lot of other reasons for it too. There's a really interesting set of studies they used to do with babies where they would have different characters or actors um, do something in front of a baby and then interact with the baby. So, for example, there would be a baby at a table. And when I say baby, I mean like under 2 years old. And they would hand it or they would put in the middle of the table like a cookie, something sweet, something nice. And then they would have a actor come into the room and in a very stern, very overbearing voice say, I do not like cookies. Cookies are bad. I really think I don't like cookies. And it would be in a very, what would seem like aggressive way, but nothing over the top. And then they would take that cookie and then try to pass it to the baby. And think about this, many children cannot resist temptations like sweets or things. But in this experiment, the baby almost every time would try to ignore the cookie after the overbearing person in the room would speak so negatively about it. And that is an infant who's like barely able to talk. Think how hardwired that is into us throughout our lives. Mass media, they talk very negatively about one thing that's in the Overton window. Most people are just simply going to be afraid to speak out maybe an idea they disagree about it. Most humans just want to agree. Now, for whatever reason, I was never like that, mostly compared to others, and maybe for developmental reasons, or maybe I was born a little special, but it always confused me very much. And you have to realize when you're dealing with people day to day, and if you ever try to come up with solutions to things, or you ever try to end up doing anything a little unorthodox, you're going to get a lot of raised eyebrows and a lot of people questioning you why you would do something like you're doing, which I tend to pretty much everything I've ever done that way. But the point is that when you start trying to improve yourself or start trying to learn, you're going to realize that next to nobody is going to share interest in higher ideas or more complex things, or trying to understand how things work. If you're in this group, you are a probably Pareto principle 80-20 distribution in the 20% person. And you almost have a responsibility, if you're these type of people, to actually start taking charge and to be a leader. Now, here's another thing that used to happen that there's a couple studies on, is they called it the general and soldiers dynamic, or officer and soldier dynamic. And this was an idea a couple of psychologists came up with. I'm not off the top of my head sure who it was, but they used to talk about how for most of human history, we were at very constant states of war. And the more successful a group was, the more they had soldiers who would follow orders. Very important. If you have 1,000+ men and can't get them to do the same thing all at the same time, you're not going to be very effective, especially if you go against another group who is able to do that. And then out of those soldiers, you would have the officers, the ones giving the rules, the ones coming up with the plans, and the ones who were in charge. And they were very different psychological makeups. And the officers a lot of times would question authority and have a superiority complex on top of it, along with they had higher levels of testosterone. They typically were a little more intelligent, and if you follow this principle out, the bell curve of the IQ tends to be similar to this concept these people talk about. And you have to, I really hate to say it, biologically, most people are not equipped to be much more than followers. And maybe you're different. Maybe you're someone who is able to be a big-time leader. I mean, we can all take leadership at different levels. There's people, even amongst soldiers, you have non-commissioned officers and you have middle-level management types. But if you're somebody who actually, that I have ever met, and it's always few, really dive deeper than everyone else, burns the midnight oil, actually ask why instead of just how, you should really consider taking over in whatever it is that you're doing and start to blaze trails in the world and trying to curate things so that it can all run better. That alone, just if you're someone who is deeply interested in why things are the way they are and the details of them all, you're probably a special person. And if you're watching one of these videos, it's a higher chance you might be as well, based off the content or the topics that we talk about. So we'll talk about this more some other times, but yeah, take that for today and think about who you are. Thanks.